This is SIG P365 380 and SIG P365XL with Holosun 507K. 1,000 round reviews. How about we flash back to when we first got a P365 and we weren't going to let a little snow stop us from getting a first magazine through the gun. This is well before our channel existed. Alright, here we go. I'm going to shoot for the center mass bullseye. Sometimes we ventured out in conditions better suited for hot cocoa. Let's give a quick shout out to our friends at Daryl's Gun Shop and Shooting Range. Thanks, Daryl's. You guys rock. Without your steady ammo supply and fine facilities, channels like ours wouldn't be possible. You're one of the few places that has had ammo available consistently, and we appreciate it. Portions of this video were filmed at Banner Shooting Range, so you're going to have to contend with some background noise at times. And now, let's hit the range. Now, right out the gate, one of the questions really anybody would ask and should ask is, if you can get the P365 in 9mm, if you can get the P365 as an XL setup, why would you get the P365 in 380? We've previously done a comparison of the P365 versus the P365 380, which we'll link in this video. So I thought for this 1,000 round review, we would now do the P365 380 against the P365 XL with the Holosun 507K and see what we could find out about that question. Let's hit the range. Now, some people are probably going to say that using the XL version against the 380 version is not fair, that the XL version, it has the longer grip and the longer slide and sight radius and it has an optic on it and all these blah 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 things. I think with the firearms being concealed carry, personal protection, home defense style guns, and both being in the P365 line of firearms, I think it's a fair enough comparison. And as a consumer, I certainly have questions of, is there an advantage or disadvantage of one versus the other, which is what we're trying to find out. Now, first glance at the targets, I say for each setup so far it is good enough, at least for me, in my personal opinion, not an expert. Now, we're going to try to do more shooting in this video than normal, so how about we do a larger sample, 2 magazines through each setup at our top set of targets, and let's see how that goes. Tactical reload. There we go. And then 12. There should be 13 shots. Again, iron sights. remember to tactical reload again. Tactical reload. That's me not counting. I got to thinking how easy this is to shoot with a hollow sun, and I forgot to count. Whoopsie. Okay, here we go. Tactical reload.
Okay, let's have you slide around.
Now, reviewing our targets, I think we have very similar groups in all three setups. The Iron Sights XL version is the top left target, the XL with the hollow sun is the top middle target, and the 380 365 is the top right target. The Iron Sights target probably looks the best group of the three, and I would say the hollow sun certainly highlights that the shooter has a lot of influence over how the gun groups and performs. Now when we get to the 380 group, what I think there is any differences there have more to do with fatigue of getting to basically 80 rounds before shooting this group than anything else. If the order was reversed, I think we would see basically similar groups and there might be a slightly better one or the other. And that has to do more with, say, the shooter and fatigue than the firearms themselves, in my non-expert opinion. Earlier we mentioned some features that some people are at least prone to claim are going to make this an unfair comparison. I'm actually going to make the argument that those features make this a more fair comparison. And let me tell you why. If we flash back to our 365 380 versus 365 9mm video, one of the points I mentioned was I never thought the 9mm version was snappy until I shot it next to the 380 version, and then I noticed a significant difference in the recoil of the two firearms. Now, I don't really want to call the 365 and 9mm snappy. I would say it has a recoil that is more taxing than some other guns. As you know, micro 9mm double stacks, I think in general, are just very taxing guns to shoot in that regard. And at the time, it reminded me that that was one of the reasons I put the Hogue grip sleeve on this 365 9mm, was to help absorb some of that recoil that makes it, we'll say, a little unpleasant in that regard. Now, it's my opinion, and well, my experience after more than 1,000 rounds through this P365XL, that with the XL grip, that you not only get a full hand grip, but a comfortable full hand grip on, and then the little extra slide length and barrel length combined, those two things combined, dampen just enough of a recoil to make it a little less taxing to shoot than the 365, the normal version, would be. Now, I still think the 380 version is significantly more mild on the recoil in that regard. However, the XL version, I think, sort of bridges the gap between the two, if you will. Now, I think if you're on the fence of saying the 365 9mm, the regular version, is just a little too much recoil for you, I would try the XL version, because I think it's just like a half step down to maybe be comfortable enough to be functional for you. It's at least worth a try if you know someone or a range that'll let you rent it first. try some double taps on this one. Same target. Terrible. There's one of those two. Okay, those two are at least on the target. And I think our last two iron sights. Okay. As you can see with iron sights, double taps poorly. Okay, let's try with the front on. I think it's loaded. It appears to be loaded. Here we go. Wow, those two were bad. Okay, here we go. Our last two at our challenge target. And my math is bad, so we have two left. Okay. I think we hit our card at least once. We did. So we got that going for us. And now, let's go with the 365 380. Double tap again. And we're going to do, I'll do 8 double taps, then the 9, 10 at the challenge card, and then we'll do our 15 round magazine. Again, just like normal. Here we go. Well, that answers that. I will say 365, 380, much easier to control on the second shot. Now, one of the things you might have noticed if you have been following along with our 365 380 series is since our first range report, in all of our videos since then, we have fired at least one magazine on video through this 15 round magazine through the 365 380. Now, part of that is we have been assessing the reliability of this magazine. It's been without fail thus far. And the other part of that, which would be most of it, is it's just a lot of fun to have a 380 magazine that holds more than 10 rounds in a firearm this size. It's a ton of fun. Another thing you've seen us do in quite a few of those videos is use the XL grip off my 365XL on the 380 and use, I mean, it's amazing shooting it in that setup. It's fantastic. In my opinion, one of the areas where SIG really hit a home run on these models is making parts like the grip frame and the trigger group interchangeable. If you already have, say, the P365XL and you get, say, the P365 380, well, now you basically have 3 different firearms. Now, just about the only thing I found so far that you can't do is you can't take the 380 barrel and put it in the 9mm slide and vice versa. And I suspect a lot of that has to do with On the 380 version, they have light in the slide, and one of the features they market on it is easy rack. It has a lighter slide, a lighter recoil spring, and I think they're sort of targeting an audience where they're not comfortable with the sort of more taxing recoil of the 365 and 9mm. And if you're one of those people, you probably also want a firearm, in my opinion, that is a little easier to rack. And so those two things I think make for nice added features on the 380 version of the 365. Now compared to the stock or original 365, the 365XL we're going to say is approximately 3 ounces heavier and about 1 inch longer in the slide and barrel. Now we've done a comparison video on those in the past, which we'll link to, and so you'll know that those measurements are not close, or they're close enough, we're going to say, for this video. Now in my opinion, those approximate 3 ounces and about 1 inch of difference mean that it does have enough of a recoil difference to be more controllable and a little less taxing than the original P365, in my opinion. When you add in the option to then have a micro red dot sight, that for some people can be huge. Here's a view of the sights through the hollow sun with the hollow sun turned off, or say in a condition where your sight was dead. On camera you see almost the whole front sight, though I feel like as the shooter you only see about the top half of it. Now, I could be wrong, I'm not an expert. I have some eye things that we've mentioned in other videos. Now with the sight on, you can see that optic red that it is shown, that is a fantastic target that it has available for you. Now I know nothing about these sights. I'm not an expert. I'm not a shill for them. Nobody pays me anything to do these videos. The only reason I really mention these hollow sun sights is because of the condition I have with my eyes. They're the only red dots that I've found that I can actually see crystal clear like you see in that picture. When everything looks like that to you, you don't really appreciate how much the value that brings to someone where almost nothing looks that clear to them. So that's why I mentioned that. Now another point I'll mention on my XL model and the hollow sun is I've never actually shot the XL without that hollow sun on it. I bought it, I put that hollow sun on it as soon as I got it because I had it in a box sitting in my closet. It's been fantastic. I'm glad I did. And so as a result, now we have well over 1,000 rounds through the firearm with that hollow sun on it, and we can comment on the reliability and how that's held up. Now other than scrubbing random pocket grime or whatever off the front of the hollow sun, I haven't had to do anything to it since mounting it to this firearm. I mounted it, I think I put a little bit of Loctite on there. But it's been fantastic. I haven't had to change the battery yet. I don't even turn it off. I didn't know how to turn it off until I went to shoot this video today, and I was like, I need to know how to turn this off so I can actually do an iron sights test through this firearm. Now there's one thing to try to ignore the red dot floating in your face, but there's another thing to actually turn off the sight and actually do that, which is what we did here today. Alright, we jabbered on quite a bit there. How about we get back to some range clips? This one, we'll start with one showing some quick shooting reliability of the 380. How about that? Aim at center mass. I'm going to do the next 10 about as fast as I can pull the trigger and then get back on target. So not like mag dump, reckless fire, but for what I'm going to aim for is controlled rapid accuracy fire. Here we go. And same center mass. Now, one of the trends you likely noticed developing throughout all of these video clips is these firearms are accurate, they're reliable, they're consistent, and they work. I fired numerous different types of ammo through these firearms, and, well, what can I say but they work. In my opinion, it's hard to complain about a firearm that works and works reliably, and at this point that I feel like is going to work whenever I need it to. Now, while I think the 365XL has less recoil than the regular 365, I wouldn't say that it's mild recoil. I would go as far, however, to say that the 365 380 has mild recoil. Now, a temptation would be to say that the 365XL is a full-sized firearm, and I think it's closer to it than maybe it would be otherwise in, say, the 365 normal setup. Still, I think with the weight differences and some other things, it's not quite to where a full-size firearm would be. But on the flip side, that's not really a negative. I think that while compared to something like my Beretta Compact or something, it does have more recoil, it definitely has less recoil than something like my regular 365 and 9mm. Now, while this isn't universally true, for some people, depending on your body size, your style, your preferred carry method, etc., you'll actually find these guns to be equally as concealable or carryable in that regard. And I'll use myself as a for example. For example, I actually prefer to carry these firearms in what I would call the less popular shoulder carry method. The reason I go with shoulder carry isn't so much to do with I think it's cool because I grew up watching Die Hard and Lethal Weapon, all these movies, but more because I'm actually, most of the time where I'm going to be carrying, I'm going to be in my car. I'm in my car for long periods of time, 2-4 hours or more, whatever. And having my firearm in a shoulder holster is a lot more convenient than having it on my hip or on my back or whatever, to where sitting in a chair that quickly gets uncomfortable, in my opinion, especially in an uncomfortable car chair. And no, I don't mean a child's seat, haha, even though I am short. Ha. For my personal use case, I think it just happens to be the most comfortable and convenient to shoulder carry, and it happens that my shoulder holster happens to fit my P365 380, my P365 9mm, and my P365XL, all the same equally well. And so for me, all three are equally as concealable. So if we have what we're going to call the same capacity, the same concealability, all that's really left is going to be caliber, right? Well, that's a question that this channel, we usually tend to avoid. We'll just be honest. I try not to say one caliber is better than another. Now, I don't know of anybody who would argue it, and I certainly think that 9mm is more powerful than 380 ACP. In general, you have higher velocity, more foot-pounds of energy, higher or more mass in the bullet. In general, you just have more stopping power. At least that's what the internet and the research tells us. Yeah, but. I'm going to yeah, but it. And where I'm going to yeah, but it is going to be the same area that I would yeah, but it if we were talking about something like the LCP Max versus the LCP2 and 22 long rifle. And the way that I will yeah, but it is in that while one shot, say, is certainly enough in certain circumstances, if you can do 10 shots effectively in the same space that you can do one spot with something else, it's hard to argue with those 10. I mean, that's a force multiplier in a way that's hard to argue with. So while with 1 or 2 or 3 shots of, say, 9mm, you're going to have certainly more power, if you can do 10 shots of 380 as effectively in the same space as you can 2 or 3 with the 9mm, well, you have, say, some force multiplying there that comes into play. And another thing that comes into play is comfort. Now, in terms of recoil and follow-up shots with something like, say, a 380, there are some people where their first shot, their second shot, their fifth shot, they're going to be more comfortable than they will ever be with a 9mm. And that's just the reality of, how life happens. And I'm not going to argue the people that want to say you should carry the highest caliber, most capacity, most velocity, energy, ammo that you possibly can, and go all out. There's certainly a point that they have. I'm not going to argue that. But on the other side, I'm not going to argue with someone who is going to carry something that they're comfortable with and feel like they can do 10 effective shots or 2 effective shots or whatever it may be. Whatever they're comfortable with, I'm not going to argue with that. I'm far from an expert, and I'm not at all qualified to make that decision for someone else. Now, in my opinion, and based on my experience with both these firearms in both 380 and 9mm, I do think both are excellent, reliable, and can be very good choices for very many people, depending on their circumstances. Now, one area I want to praise these firearms, and it's not really unique to these firearms, is that we try on our channel to shoot our firearms represent in conditions that be realistic and apply to most people, or at least people where I live. Now, as a result, that means on the days where the weather sucks and it's winds are gusting to 45 degrees or it's raining or snowing, we're going to be out there whenever we can. And that also means when it's 15 degrees and the weather sucks, we're going to be out there. And when it's negative 15 degrees, we're going to find a way to be out there and experience it. Now, while I haven't put tens of thousands of rounds through these guns in negative 40 degree weather or whatever, what I can tell you is I have fired these guns when it is negative 10 degrees outside and the weather sucks and it feels like it's negative 78 degrees outside. And what I can tell you is, at least in the 20, 30, 40, 50 rounds I fired those days, they worked without fail. Now, that is not unique to these platforms or SIG or any gun in general. In fact, the majority of guns that we test work in most of the harsh conditions, like negative 20 below or whatever that we occasionally get to test in. But at the same time, I feel like it is worth mentioning because we don't get to pick the weather, and bad guys don't get to pick the weather, and we're not always going to be in an ideal situation. There might be a time, it might be the one time, Murphy Law is going to strike. And heaven forbid if you ever need to use your firearm and it's negative 20 below, well, at least I know my SIG P365 is going to work in those conditions. Now, I can't speak for you, but at least speaking for myself, knowing firsthand that my firearm is going to work in those conditions gives me a lot of confidence in said firearm. We sort of hinted at the beginning these firearms worked under a wide range of conditions which suited at least my environment, and I'm glad we remembered at least towards the end to circle back to that. Now, while I haven't said and I certainly acknowledge I have not fired these firearms in all climates and all places of the globe, but if you exist somewhere where you're firing them somewhere outside of negative 20 below to beyond the 110 degrees that we will shoot them in, and you have a different experience than us, we would certainly love to hear it because it was going to add some value to our discussion. Alright, so this video is probably super long, so we're going to pause here for a part 2 that's probably going to come up. Let us know what you want to see in the follow-up video. Thanks for watching. As always, have a good day.